What is a living trust? And do you need one? Now, I'm not an attorney, so this is not legal advice. Just my take and my experience going back to 1998 as a financial planner. I think a living trust is underutilized when it needs to be utilized and way overutilized when it doesn't. All right, so let's just say I just got off the horn with a lady, let's call her Joni. All right, Joni in California. And we'll say Joni's got a son who's got some issues. Could be special needs. Maybe he has ADHD, ADD. Maybe he's got some kind of spendthrift. Maybe he shoots fentanyl up his veins, and all these different things. Whatever it is, it matters not what it is. It just matters that if he were to inherit a sizable amount of money, that could literally kill him. Maybe it's just gullible. Maybe he falls a prey to a smiling, pretty face, like, "Hi, Joey, I'm free tonight." And then Joey says, "Oh my God, she really loves me. Here's $50,000," and then she's out the door. Same goes for men too. Or men can do the same thing with ladies. I get it. And you're like, man, Joey just not quite there for whatever reason. He can't manage his financial affairs. All right. So you're helping him and you're watching him as you're the mom. You're watching him. You're like, all right, I'm taking care of Joey. I'm taking care of Joey. What happens when you die? And then you have these assets that you're leaving downstream to Joey. What happens? Get my hat on. Well, in that case, Joey's going to inherit these assets outright if you just leave them via a will or leave it via beneficiary designation. And if he were to inherit those assets, and all of a sudden you got people come knocking at your door, "Hi, Joey, yeah, let's go to date," Joey could quickly give your money to that lady. Oh, by the way, he'll take the money out, he'll pay tax on it, and the lady walks away tax-free with your assets. We don't want that. Secondly, Joey could give that money away to his dope dealer. Again, Joey will take the money out from the account. If it's an IRA, pay tax on it, give the money to the dope dealer, and the dope dealer got your money tax-free. Don't want that. Or Joey just might not be able to manage his affairs anyway for whatever reason. So what you do in that regard is you don't have a beneficiary designation, give the money directly to Joey. This is on IRA accounts first and foremost, which is the bulk of most people's assets. What you do is you name a trust. You name a living trust, essentially. It could be a testamentary trust, but we're going to say it's a trust to manage your assets when you're incapacitated or when you're dead. And so we're going to start with this book, which you should get from Henry Apps. It's been a while since I read this, but Living Trust, a fail-proof way to pass along your estate to heirs without lawyers, courts, or the probate system. And we're just going to talk about exactly the most important person in a trust and why or why not you should have one. It's a trustee. All right, so Henry says the trustee is the individual or individuals, in the plural, who handles the administration of the trust. When a trust is first created, the trustees are usually the same individuals as the trustors or the settlers of the trust, i.e. the grantors, the people who are established in the trust. For a married couple, usually both the husband and wife are co-trustees. You have presumably managed your assets reasonably well, and this management should continue after you created a living trust. Therefore, once your trust is created, you will now step into the trustee of the trust assets. It's just you. Nothing has changed. There's no different taxpayer ID. It's just you. With the same freedom and power to do everything else that you did before you had the trust. It's just a different titling of the account if you are the trustee and the grantor. All right, because it's your money, man. All right. The trustee is not required to be a resident of the state in which the trust is formed or settled. In fact, it's quite common for trustees to reside in other states or even outside the country. Now, this is the second one. So basically, I set up a living trust. I do not want Joey to get the money outright. So I'm going to set up a living trust to become the owner of the accounts at my death. In the interim, I'm essentially the trustee. Now, it's still an IRA. And a trust can't really own an IRA. I get there's the things called trustee IRAs and all that stuff, but we're not going down that road here because generally speaking, that's to be for corporate trustees, which is pretty expensive. But I'm setting up a living trust while I'm alive. All right, my living trust says Josh and Charlotte are co-trustees. We can act on everything as if it were not in a living trust because we are the grantors who funded the trust and we are the trustees who manage it, and all taxes come back to us as well. However, at my death, I want all my assets to flow into this trust so that Joey doesn't have access to it and just ruin him or ruin it, if that makes sense. And that doesn't mean I'm narking on Joey or saying he's a bad kid. I'm just saying fundamentally he cannot manage affairs, his own financial affairs. Thus, we have to put a provision in there to see that he doesn't hurt himself. And that's where the secondary trustee, or what's called a successor trustee, it comes in. A successor trustee. So now Josh and Charlotte will kill off Josh. Charlotte dies. Who comes to manage the affairs on behalf of Joey when Charlotte dies? A successor trustee must also be named as the manager of the trust assets upon your death or incompetence. Or upon the death or okay. This individual step into your shoes upon your death or incompetence without requiring any court order. I cannot stress this. A durable power of attorney can do this too, by the way. But a durable power of attorney can't do it for IRA assets that are, once you're dead, a durable power of attorney stops at death. And so then it's the beneficiary designation. If the beneficiary designation at your death is solely Joey, he gets the money and nothing can stop him. So what we're doing is we're naming a living trust to receive the assets upon my death, and we're naming a successor trustee, in my case, my sister, to manage that to benefit old Joey. I hope that makes sense. That successor trustee is critically important. All right. The successor trustee will immediately have the same powers that you as trustee had to buy, sell, borrow against, transfer the trust assets. An even more important function for the successor trustee is to use or distribute the assets according to what your living trust stated. However, successor trustee may not in any way change the trust language. As a good practice, Henry says, I recommend that you ask those individuals who you desire to name as your successor trustee whether they are willing to serve as successor trustees, because it can be a pain in the butt with a lot of family dynamics kicking in there. I'm telling you. A successor trustee cannot change the language of the trust. And there's another thing about a living trust. Once you die, the living trust is no more living, a la revocable. It's no longer revocable. It cannot be revoked. It becomes irrevocable. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. So be advised, man. If you have a living trust and the living trust is named as the beneficiary of your IRA, and it's been 10 to 15 years since you revisited that living trust, and the person who was your successor trustee is now a crackhead, you got to freaking change that over. A living trust at your death becomes irrevocable. It can't be changed. And that previous successor trustee is still the trustee now, other than a court order saying that previous successor trustee is a crackhead. Well, who's going to take that to court? Who? Joey? All right, so a lot of people say, why don't I? So look, I got no qualm with setting up a living trust to manage my financial affairs at my demise. Now, you might have a brokerage account. We'll say old Joni has, I don't know, $1.5 million in IRA, $500,000 in a brokerage account. Well, Joni should put her brokerage account in a living trust as well. Because again, Joni dies, in her will, it goes right to old Joey. We don't want that to happen. We want it to go directly to the trust, which is managed by Joey, by Joey's aunt, in this case, my sister Abby, if that makes sense. All right, so you have financial accounts, very amenable to putting in trust. You can't put an IRA in a trust. You can put a brokerage account, a bank account in a trust. Part two of this, people say, how about putting an asset like a home? Look, I'm not an attorney. At the end of the day, if we're trying to take care of Joey from managing financial assets, which can be given away just like that, putting a house in a trust might be beneficial, but that's the least of my concerns because Joey can't just write a check against a house, if that makes sense. Joey just can't say, here, sweet pea, here's my house. He'd have to actually get the deed or go to probate to put the deed on. Now, look, that can happen. I'm telling you right now. Lots of scandals out there. They know how to do this. But putting the house in the trust is the least of my concerns if we're trying to protect a child or a cousin or somebody like that, or a surviving spouse from him or herself. The biggest thing would be the financial assets, because those can be liquidated and handed over to a bad person just like that. A house is a whole lot harder. But with that said, yes, putting a home in a trust makes sense, but I don't think is a primary driver here. In fact, if you think about what happens when you put a home in a trust, insurance companies got to get involved. Your county might change your property tax. It can be more of a pain than it might be worth. That's up to you to think about with your insurance company, with your county. But I'm telling you, if you got a heir that you want to leave money to, but has problems financially, a living trust is 100% the way to go. But you cannot just rely on the living trust you've done 15 years ago. You got to review this, man. Just like your wills, you've got to review it. Things change. Executors or executrixes of a will, do we still want that person in there? Maybe the guy freaking voted for Biden's estate plan. You're like, no, man, if I don't trust you with your vote, I don't trust you with my kids' money. Hell no. I don't trust any Biden clown. I'm going to freaking name, I don't know, what's the guy's name from the Trump campaign? I forgot, Steve Miller or something. I'll name him as my trustee. I'm just being facetious. But you're saying, I don't know if I trust you. Maybe Uncle Bob was your trustee 15 years ago. He was a big attorney, and now he's got Alzheimer's. Do you want him? No. Do you want someone who's 15 years older than you anyway? No. Get someone like my sister, 7 years younger, knows what she's doing. She knows his business. Perfect for a successor trustee. Perfect for executrix for women for my will. Now, she knows that. I've made it very clear for Abby, and she knows. But just because you have someone who's well endowed in terms of financial planning, does that person know or desire to be part of your estate settlement? You got to find out. Anyway, so get this book. I'm going to put another link in another book from Vicky Schumacher, Understanding Living Trust. Get both these, man. I would get both these, and these aren't hard to read, man. These aren't hard. These are fantastic. I'd be such a big fan of this. Here we got a table for necessary provisions for a good trust. Name a trust, revocable living trust. Date, which is it's DTD, dated 9/1/2011, whatever it is. Parties to the trust: the grantor, the trustees, the successor trustees, and the beneficiaries. Who's the ultimate recipient of the trust assets? That's the big one right there. Trust property, what is being transferred to a trust. A trust with no property has no value. A trust needs to have assets in it. Now, a trust might not have any assets in it if everything you're leaving to the trust is in an IRA. But if you're trying to name a trust and you forgot to fund the trust, i.e. with your bank accounts or your brokerage accounts, the trust isn't worth the paper it's written on, because those assets will transfer via will, not trust. The trust is completely silent if it has no assets which to transfer. Then successor trustee, the big one right there. And then, of course, the trustee powers. All right, love to hear your thoughts on that. It's a big deal. All right, thanks now.